Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about the Zelda remake that is destined to happen. And this Zelda remake that we're talking about here today might not be the one that you're thinking of, or it is. We shall see. Ultimately, what I want to get at today is just the overall direction or expectation of the Zelda remakes, and what makes sense. Because I do think more are on the way. Us Zelda fans want to see more. There's always a clamoring for more remasters and remakes for the Legend of Zelda games, especially now with this new direction of Zelda with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and even Echoes of Wisdom. That linear style of Zelda seems to be a thing of the past, so there's definitely a yearning for a return to some of these games that have more of that linear structure. And while there's one particular Zelda remake that I definitely think is happening within the next couple years, there's another that I think is destined to happen, and that's what I'd like to speak more on today. But before going forward, let me ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit the notification bell. So the Zelda remake that I'm not really trying to talk about today, but I do think is happening within the next couple years, is a remake for The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. I've talked about this a few times already. There was a video I put out about a month or so ago, you can see it here. And I went over a number of different interviews where it's very clear that Eiji Aonuma likes to tease future Zelda games, and we have confirmation of these teases on several different occasions. So this is something that he absolutely 100% does, and he himself has told us that. But one of the big points I wanted people to take away from that video is that there's this history of Aonuma laughing or acting a bit coy when in an interview and asked about a future Zelda game. And essentially, by looking at all of my findings that I had for that particular video, to me, it's painfully clear that Ocarina of Time is definitely being worked on or being considered. And I think something like that could likely be coming out in 2026 for the 40th anniversary for The Legend of Zelda, and still pretty early on into the Switch 2 lifecycle, because I expect the console to come out sometime next year. But as I've already said, Ocarina of Time Remake is not the remake we're talking about today. There are other possibilities, and maybe my theory is wrong. Maybe they're not remaking Ocarina of Time, but they are remaking another Zelda game. Now, if they do remake Ocarina of Time, which again I predict they will, I also think the conversation will then open up to, will they remake Majora's Mask? And I think there's a likelihood for that down the road as well. But the Zelda game that I think is destined to happen is Twilight Princess. You see, we've gone past the point of where we need to modernize the different 3D Zeldas in terms of being in HD, excluding Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. So this idea of just remastering a game, I think we're well past that point. Skyward Sword's gotten that remaster treatment, Wind Waker's gotten that remaster treatment, and even Twilight Princess has gotten that remaster treatment. And while Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask haven't been put into HD, they have already been remastered, with their 3D versions on 3DS. And then of course Breath of the Wild and Tears are the recent Zelda games on the Switch. When it comes to 3D Zelda, there's no more to really remaster. Now there is some talk that Breath of the Wild might be getting a 4K 60 FPS version, but that wouldn't be quite the same given that the Switch is still the current console now and Breath of the Wild was a launch title for it. If Nintendo still wants to revisit the 3D Zelda games, we're past the point of remastering them. They're going to have to start thinking about remaking them. Now I do feel the need to mention the long-rumored Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD ports from Wii U to Nintendo Switch. But it's been so long, it definitely gets me wondering if they have other plans in mind instead. And with the remake, we are talking about more ambition here, more work being done. From a visual perspective, it would be made to look like a modern game. And perhaps there could even be some gameplay changes as well. I think about what Capcom did with Resident Evil 4 Remake. Something along those lines might not be so far-fetched. And so excluding Breath and Tears because of their recency on the Switch, and excluding Ocarina and Majora's Mask because I think those have a pretty good chance of happening already, the 3 other Zelda games we have left are Skyward Sword, Wind Waker, and Twilight Princess. Skyward Sword and Wind Waker have a cel-shaded art style. They are going to age gracefully, and to put in the kind of work that it would take to remake these games, it just doesn't feel like the best way to spend your resources. But Twilight Princess, that's the one that I think deserves the remake the most. They remastered Twilight Princess for Nintendo Wii U, but it wasn't an in-house remaster like Wind Waker. It was done by Tantalus, and they certainly put some work in. There were some quality of life updates, they did redo a lot of the textures, but there was a great deal of disappointment when it came to this particular game. And perhaps the biggest reason for that is because Nintendo already set a very high expectation for a reworking of Twilight Princess. You see, back in 2011, Nintendo put out a tech demo to showcase the abilities of the Nintendo Wii U. There were two. There was one of a bird flying around, and there was this other that was clearly a modern visual take of Twilight Princess. And even by today's Switch standards, I still think it looks incredible, but hardware's better now, and on Nintendo Switch 2, it's leaps and bounds better. In theory, Nintendo could go back and remake Twilight Princess to look even better than this tech demo. And if they were to do something like this, I definitely think a big part of the Zelda fanbase would be extremely excited for it. But I also think revisiting Twilight Princess as more of a remake where there's going to be actual changes to the gameplay would be a huge opportunity to right some of the wrongs of Twilight Princess. Because while I love Twilight Princess, it has its issues. I feel that Twilight Princess has one of the best overall art directions in the series. I love the different takes they have on the different enemies, especially the bosses. These are some of the best designed bosses in the series, I would argue. They are so epic. But something that really takes away from how epic they are is the straight up difficulty. They're all so easy to beat. And I think when you're fighting a giant gargantuan monstrosity, and then you find a very easy to discern pattern and it's very easy to avoid every single attack, it takes away from the impact of its design. It doesn't feel as epic or as grandiose of a moment. I think challenge matters. Now of course everyone has varying levels of expertise when it comes to Zelda in different games, but since Twilight Princess, the mainline Zelda games have become more difficult. The Zelda team figured something out there when it comes to difficulty, and I would like to think that if they were to truly revisit this game, they would fix that. Perhaps change around the boss patterns a little bit, perhaps make the attacks a little bit more erratic, and I think that would make a big difference. But I would also like to see just the overall combat improved, because Link has quite a moveset that he can learn throughout Twilight Princess, but while there are a lot of moves, because of the difficulty of the game and the simplicity of the enemies and their attack patterns, there's not really a need for these different attacks. They're mostly optional. I would love it if they were to rework some of the enemy AI so it's actually needed to use some of these different moves against these enemies. And I think that would make combat all the more satisfying. But there's another element of Twilight Princess that I think left something to be desired. And that's this motif of animals, or this inclination towards nature. You see, Link is a farmer in Twilight Princess and can interact with the goats, has a special bond with his horse Epona, works with the monkeys in the forest temple, and even becomes a wolf. There are certainly plenty of elements in Twilight Princess that show that Link has a special bond with animals and can work with them throughout the game. But as the game draws on, there isn't really as much animal influence anymore. And I think with a reworking of Twilight Princess, they should go back to some of the areas of this game and rethink it in a way that includes more wildlife, or more puzzles that includes different animals. So essentially I'm asking for some dungeon redesigns here where we see different animals incorporated into the puzzle mechanics of this game, and perhaps even more put into the overworld as well. I know you can call hawks and things of that nature when you blow on some different types of grass and also your horse, but perhaps find a few other ways to include the different animals. Now going beyond these issues that I would like to see rectified with a remake of Twilight Princess, some other improvements I would like to see, well, voice acting would be pretty nice. I think that would make for a big difference in the storytelling. And more to do in the overworld. There are some big maps to explore in Twilight Princess, but there isn't that much to do. Perhaps by introducing more animals to the game, you can also introduce more side quests having to do with different animals, because Wolf Link can communicate with different animals. And maybe we see these different animals in the overworld, and there's different gameplay mechanics involving them, and these could even tie into some different things you can do in dungeons. And some of these side quests could even include new minigames involving different animals. There's already some fun things you do with the monkeys in the forest temple. I'm sure they could find other ways to do other interesting things. And so I think at some point down the road, that tech demo we saw for the Wii U, that was clearly an improvement of Twilight Princess, I think they should revisit that and make a full-on Twilight Princess remake with some needed improvements that right the wrongs of the initial release that would make it a truly masterful experience. It's already a great game, I'm not saying it isn't, but it definitely could be made even better. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart, thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.